Hi there guys, welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be looking at the accounting standard 3.6, which is demonstrating understanding of a job cost subsystem for an entity. What that kind of means is we're going to be estimating the cost of a job before we do it for the business. We're going to make sure to apply our overheads, which is going to be the costs not associated with the job, so stuff like electricity and rent. We're going to do the source documents for that, so our tax invoices, our employee work cards, stuff like that. We're going to do some journal entries, and then we're going to do a write-up at the end to finish it all off. So we'll get into that now, guys. Okay, guys, so coming on to part A here, we're going to be just doing some source documents. So we're going to be looking at applying overhead to a job, the job cost card, the tax invoice, and then in part B we're going to get onto the journal entries, and then in part C we're going to do the write-up, just like what I explained before. So anyway, coming on to what this task is actually entailing. So it's on a bag manufacturer that produces suitcases and luggage. They employ, let's bring this up here, zoom in. So they employ 10 full-time seamstresses, 2 part-time craftsmen. They specialize in manufacturing and one-off creations for travel and theatre. So yada yada. So a regular customer of them is Bags Galore. So they're producing some bags that they need at the moment. And we are looking at doing their job costing for them. Coming on to the next page here, just kind of skimming through that stuff. It's not too relevant. Okay, so using the information provided in resource 1, we're going to need to calculate the overheads, prepare a job cost card, an invoice for the finished job, and then the journal entries. And then we're going to go on to the write-up. Yep, sounds good. Okay. So looking here at resource 1, we can tell a few things. So the following table shows the cost for completed traveling trunks. Unless specifically stated, all costs are GST exclusive. So that means, just remembering guys, for our invoice at the end, we're going to need to include GST in that. So anyway, starting off with our calculation of the overhead applied to this job, guys. What we're going to want to do here is to kind of make an estimate. So it's going to be based on our estimates for the year over here. So looking at our direct labor hours and our machine hours, those are amounts of time. So those are going to come in a little bit later. So what we're going to want to start with is just the estimated indirect costs. Okay, so these areas in here. So we're going to come over here to our working space, guys, and we're just going to fill those numbers in. So 25,000 plus the next one, which is 23,000, plus the next one, which is 51,000. And chucking those into our calculators, guys, is going to give us 99,000. Okay, so that's what the estimated cost is in total, okay, for all those jobs, all right? What we need to do is we need to allocate it to a certain amount of jobs. Okay, so that's the estimated overhead total divided by the estimated chosen cost driver overhead. Okay, it's a little bit confusing. So what we're doing is, because people are using this, we're going to divide it by 6,600 for the machine hours, the labor hours. Okay, and then we're going to times that by the amount of hours used on the job, if that's here, 30. So it's a little bit confusing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 99,000 divided by 6,600. Okay, that's going to give us 15. So 99,000 divided by 6,600. It's going to give us 15. So guys, just remember what we're doing here is we're taking all of the indirect costs, okay? All of the indirect costs, we're dividing them by labor hours so we can find out how many indirect costs are kind of like going into each labor hour, right? And now what we're going to do is we're going to take that this number here, which we found, which is 15, and we're going to times it by the amount of labor hours used on this job, okay? Because that's the job we're doing, job 290, okay? This is kind of the most confusing part of the write-up, of the source documents, so don't get put off just by this. It gets a lot easier. So 15 times 30, guys, putting that into our calculators, we know that is 450. So the total allocation, total overhead for job, is 450. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll go on to our job cost card. So our job cost card is just kind of like a record that tracks all of our direct materials, direct labor, and applied overhead costs for a specific job, okay? So, just zooming out here a little bit. Can we zoom out? Yeah, can we? Yeah, there we go. So starting off with here, guys, we know that it's going to be job 290 over here, right? That one's pretty straightforward, so we're going to put 290 over here. In terms of the customer number, there we go. So prepare an invoice, just says it over here, guys. Prepare an invoice for finished job traveling trunks to charge Auckland Musical Theatre Company. Customer number AMTC 100. So we'll write that in now here. AMTC 100. Okay. What we will do now is we will just fill in this here. So to start off with, our direct material, as we've found over here, is 500. So we're going to put that in over here. I'll just ignore that. Okay, coming over to our start and our finish date. Where does it say that? Yeah, so up here, guys, we started on the 5th of January. It's covered up, but that would probably say 2019. And it was finished on the 10th of January, 2019. So we'll go over here and we'll go 5 January. Just put Jan, 10 Feb. And now we also know here, guys, that the markup is 150%. So we can just put 150% in there. Okay, for the direct labor, guys, the direct labor cost is $35 an hour, okay? And now the direct labor hours used on this job were 30. So what we're going to do is we're going to go 30 times 35, which is going to give us 1,050. Okay, so we're going to put 1,050 over in there. And then finally, guys, we just calculated the overhead up here, up there. So all we need to do is just put the number from up there, which is 450. I'll just highlight that there. Okay, so so the overhead is a kind of a carry through there. And now what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to add all those up together, which is going to give us 2,000. So guys, just for our source documents, just really important that you kind of read through here. It may seem like I kind of just did all that stuff a little bit randomly, but once you do a practice test or two, or you rewatch this video a few times, you'll really start to get it once you kind of start doing it yourself. Just really important to read through the resource document very carefully, because there's some things that can definitely catch you up. Anyway, guys, we'll move on to the second one, which is a tax invoice, okay? So, we'll start off with who we're invoicing. So, on the previous page, we're talking about invoicing Auckland Musical Theatre Company. So, we'll write that in here, guys. So, the invoice is to Auckland Musical Theatre Company. Okay, or the Auckland Musical Theatre Company. Look, we may as well just put in their PO box over here, which is 240 Auckland. Just write it out properly, which is what you'd do if it was an actual invoice. PO box 2450 Auckland. Nice. Okay, coming on to this kind of stuff on the side over here. I'll get onto that now. So our invoice number is going to be 9780, as we've kind of got over here. So we're going to put that in, 9780. And the date of issue was 15th of January, February 2019. So 15 Feb 2019. Okay, so coming over back to here, it was just for traveling trunks, for job traveling trunks. So we'll put that in here, traveling trunks. Okay, so remembering back from our job cost card, guys, the total cost of the job was going to be $2,000. Okay, so you may think that that's how much we're going to charge them for the tax invoice, but what we're actually got to remember is that we need to include the markup percent of 150%. Okay, so in terms of calculating 150% markup, we're just going to go to our calculators. We're going to put in 2,000 times by 2. And times by 1.5, not 1.5, sorry, times by 2,000, 2,000 times by 2 and 2,000 times by 1.5. And the increase of 2,000 times by 2 is obviously double, so it's 2,000. And the increase of timesing it by 1.5 is 1,000. We add those together, we get 3,000. So that means 2,000 plus a $3,000 markup. Okay, that's the 150% markup. It's a little bit complicated in terms of calculating markup, but once you do it a few times, guys, you'll definitely start to get a hang of it. So our quantity, we're just going to put 1 in there because they don't actually tell us. Do they tell us? Don't think so. Yeah, they would just put 1 in there, and the amount is going to be 5,000, guys, like we just said. Okay, so that means our subtotal will be 5,000. Now remembering, guys, all the amounts here are GST exclusive, okay, and that's really important to remember, so we need to add GST on. Adding GST on is reasonably straightforward. We just times by 1.15, which is going to give us 5,750 as our total. And now we can see here, guys, that the GST is obviously just going to be 750. Okay, guys, so that kind of wraps up the source documents. What we'll do is we'll get onto our journal entries now, okay? Okay, so essentially, guys, for our journal sections here, it's pretty straightforward. A lot of it is just going to be taking information from here and just putting it in into our journals with kind of limited to no calculations. Only a small little bit is kind of complicated. But what we'll do is we'll get into it now. So in this practice test here, it's actually given us everything we need to put in. If you're allowed a cheat sheet, I'd recommend kind of rewriting this entire table out just so you have a memory of kind of how to do the formatting correctly. If you're not allowed a cheat sheet, once you kind of do this a few times, you'll kind of start to get the hang of it. So anyway, starting off with, we're looking at during March. Okay, so we're looking at all of these figures in here and over here as well. So starting off with, we're looking at the purchase of raw materials on credit. So immediately here, guys, we can see that it is 5,750, and that's including GST. Okay, so to find the GST exclusive amount, we go 5,750 divided by 1.15. It's going to give us 5,000. So the cost of the raw materials themselves, 5,000, GST 750, accounts payable 5,750. Now, guys, remembering our debits and our credits, I'll write it out just up here. Assets. Plus expenses equals liabilities plus income plus owner's equity, which we don't need to worry about. So guys, we're going to be paying this money to the creditor, to whoever we bought these raw materials from, right? And that's going to be a liability because we bought it on credit, so it's going to be owed to someone else. Just quickly, guys, just watch my video on 2.4 if this is your first year doing accounting. I'd recommend just having a watch through that video. It kind of explains journals a little bit more in depth than what I'm going to do now. Yeah, go check out that video. Okay, so what we will, just get rid of that there. What we will start off with is going to be our raw materials themselves, right? So those raw materials are an expense, and they're 5,000. Like, sorry, 5,000, like we just confirmed. So we'll put 5,000 in there. Now remember, guys, we also need to include our GST, so we're going to put that in here below, and that's going to be 750. Okay. Now, guys, the total amount, like we have over here, is going to be 5,750, okay? And that's going to be our accounts payable, okay? Just like from level 2, if you guys remember from that. So we'll put that in, accounts payable. Nice, okay, so that's that first kind of section done. Moving on to the next section, we're looking at our work in progress. So our work in progress is it's right here. Raw materials issued to, is it raw materials issued to production? Yes, it is. Raw materials issued to production. So that's going to be our credit side, and then we're also going to have our debit side, which is going to be work in progress. Okay. A little bit complicated. Remembering, guys, that we are looking at the period during March. We're not looking at inventories on the 1st of March. Okay, so just coming over here, guys, we're going to put in work in progress. And raw materials. Now, remembering, guys, just if you're allowed to have a cheat sheet, I'd really highly recommend just writing this out on your cheat sheet, this kind of order. It's going to be the same most times. Check with your teacher, obviously, though. But if it's the same, then you can just get away with not actually knowing kind of the meaning behind a lot of this stuff, which we'll still go over in this video, of course, though. All right, moving on, guys. Looking at indirect materials to be charged to overhead. So that's going to be our factory overhead control and our raw materials, okay? So put those in, factory overhead control and raw materials. Okay, so again, guys, coming over here, indirect materials issued to production. So that's the same thing. So again, we're just going to fill it in, 800 and 800. And now, guys, this is just going to be the same, it's just going to be the same format every time, okay? So it's always going to be factory overhead and raw materials, okay? Moving on to direct labor charged to production, that is going to be work in progress and payroll control. So we'll put those in here. All right, and now, guys, that is going to be from direct labor charged to production. Okay, so just filling those in as well. Again, 19,000, 19,000. Indirect labor charged to overhead is going to just be the supervisor's salary. That's what it's going to come under over here. It's going to be our factory overhead control and our payroll control. All right, and that's just going to be 7,000. So as you guys can kind of see, it's just copying and changing the words from what we get in our resource document. So it's pretty straightforward. Looking at our next one here, which is factory expenses to be charged to overhead. Just remembering, guys, our overhead is costs that aren't included in that are overhead. So when we're doing a job, the direct costs are the labor and the materials involved, and the overhead would be stuff like the electricity or the rent that's associated with running the rest of the company. Okay, so these factory general expenses and maintenance are going to be costs that aren't directly associated with the job, but are still very important. Okay, and they are part of our applied overheads. Okay, so when we're looking at our factory expenses to be charged to overhead, what we're going to have is we're going to have our overhead control, which is just our normal account. So factory overhead control. And then we're going to have these two accounts here. So factory general expenses and factory maintenance. Now this is going to be 2,500 and factory maintenance. Adding those two up, that one will be 500. Adding those two up, guys, is going to give us 3,000. So we'll put that in there. Nice. All right. So moving on, we are looking at factory overhead charge to production. Now, this is a little bit different, guys. So we know that there is the direct labor hours worked during the period was 700, okay? And we also know that we got $15 per hour was the direct, $15 per direct labor hour was the predetermined overhead rate, guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 15 times 700 to find out the next figure here, okay? So just remembering, guys, when we are looking at finding our factory overhead charge to production, we're going to do the direct labor hours during that period, okay? And then we're going to take the figure from our overhead applied to the job just to find the overhead per direct labor hour, which is 15, and we're going to times those by each other. So 700 times by 15 is going to give us 10,500, okay? So the two accounts that we're going to have in here are going to be work in progress and factory overhead control. Oops. Perfect. And that's going to be 10,500. All right. Coming on to our next part here, which is the completed production transferring to finished goods. We know over here, guys, that the cost of jobs completed was 33,000. So that's just going to be the two accounts there. So finished goods and work in progress. Okay, so we're closing off those accounts. So finished goods and work in progress. Okay, 33,000. 33,000. Okay, then the next section here is looking at the cost of the finished goods sold. So that's going to be our cost of goods sold. Okay, so we're going to debit our cost of goods sold and we're going to credit our finished goods. Okay, so we'll put that in here. Finished goods. And cost of goods sold. So we're going to debit cost of goods sold for the same amount that we found over here, which is 38,000. And finished goods we will credit. So again, guys, definitely go check out, do a bit of revision on not 2.4, sorry, 2.3, I think it is, which is looking at your statements for level 2. It just kind of explains this stuff a little bit more in detail. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Finally, looking at the transfer of under applied overhead, we calculate that from the next page over here. So we'll just go ahead and we'll get into that next page here. So this is looking at our general journal entries and just doing the changes for those. So the first one is our raw materials control. So again, guys, coming over here, we know that our raw materials was 7,000. So that's going to be our opening balance on the 1st of March 2019. So we'll just put 1 MAR in there. It's going to be our balance. Just coming over here, $7,000 balance, and that's going to be our debit. It's going to be a debit. Again, guys, just go check out my video on 2.3. Just kind of goes over what journals kind of are a little bit more. I won't go over that so much in this video. Yeah, so the first kind of change we saw coming back over here, guys, was from our accounts payable for $5,000, and it was a $5,000 debit to our raw materials account over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and put it back into our raw materials control. Okay, so over here we're going to say accounts payable. Alright, and that's going to be 5,000. Remember, we're not going to include GST in there, guys. Coming on to our next part we're going to look at is going to be just the next line, next section on down in here, which is from our work in progress. So again, guys, we're just going to put that work in progress in there, and that's going to be a credit. So just kind of like a way, again, guys, if you don't want to actually kind of learn what it all means underneath, is just look at where it says raw materials for this section, or where it says, you know, work in progress. Look where it says that. So it says it here. It's going to be a credit. So I'm just going to come over here, put it in credit, and then change the name to the other section, just so we can identify it, because otherwise every single line would be saying raw materials, right? Anyway, lost my train of thought. The next one, there's one more for raw materials, and it's down here. So again, guys, it's in the credit, so it's going to be a credit, and we're just going to take the name from the one above. So factory overhead controls for an $800 credit. $800. Okay, so debit on a debit, guys, is going to increase, so that's going to be 12,000. Credit on a debit will decrease it, that's going to take this down to 6,000. And then finally, another credit will decrease it again, down to 5,200. Again, guys, I know I'm going to keep saying this, check out that 2.3 video, it really explains this a little bit more. Okay, coming on to work in progress. We will find the balance, which is over here. Balance over here, work in progress, which is 9,000. Okay, so we'll start off by putting balance on 1 March. We'll put a 31 up there as well, guys, just because that is when the rest of the stuff happens. So we'll put it on the 31st of March. So anyway, coming back to this, our opening balance is going to be 9,000. And it's obviously going to be a debit. Okay, it's going to be balance. Okay, so coming across to our area over here, we're looking at the first time where it says work in progress, which is just up here, guys. So again, following that same kind of formulaic approach as above, we're going to see that it says work in progress, $6,000 debit. Okay, so we're going to bring a $6,000 debit across, and we're just going to name it the other thing, which is raw materials. Okay, so our next line on the 31st of March is going to be raw materials, $6,000. for 6,000, and it's going to be a debit. Bringing our balance up to 15,000. Remembering, guys, a debit plus a debit is going to increase. All right, perfect. Moving on, we're looking for our work in progresses. So there's none here. There's none here. So the next one is over here. So work in progress, $19,000 debit, and it's going to be payroll control. That's what the other thing says. So coming over here, guys, payroll control, 19,000. That's going to increase 15,000 plus 19,000 is going to give us 34,000. So it's going to be a $34,000 debit. Again, guys, increasing up as they're both debits. All right, continuing on. The next for work in progress is going to be down here. So again, guys, that is a $10,500 debit, and we're changing the name to factory overhead control right beneath it. So factory overhead control. Control. Squeeze it on in there. Control. Not very neat writing, that's okay. That's going to be 10,500. 10,500 plus 34,000, guys, is going to give us 44,500. So we'll go ahead and put that in. And that is a debit. Alright, and then looks like there's one more for finished goods. Yep, so work in progress, finished goods. It's a credit, so it's going to be finished goods credited by 33,000. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. So finished goods. And that is 33,000. So guys, a credit on a debit is going to decrease it. So 44,500 minus 33,000 is going to give us 11,500. Still a debit though. Alrighty, moving on again to payroll controls. Just having a look in here. Is there just looking for the opening bank. Yeah, so the opening bank here, guys, is going to be from during March. There was direct labor charge to production, which was 19,000. And then there was a supervisor's salary of 7,000. Okay, so those two are going to add together to make 26,000. Okay, so we're just looking for any payroll, and then we are going to make that our bank for the kind of, not so much the balance, because it's not a balance, it's a bit different. It's what we're going to, because there's no balance, we're not going to have a balance to start off with, so we're just going to jump straight into the transactions, and that first one is going to be just included in here, and it's not really on the other one just because it's payroll. So we'll just put it in as bank in here. That was 26,000. And that's going to give us a 26,000 debit balance. Okay, so that one's quite confusing. Again, guys, once you kind of do a few of these practice tests, you'll start to wrap your head around it just a little bit more. The next line, next off, we'll come over here, just looking for any payroll control. So you see this one in here for 19,000. So again, guys, just following that same rule of bringing them across, it's going to be a $19,000 credit called work in progress. So work in progress. $19,000. Alrighty, coming across again, guys, looking for payroll control, seeing if there's anything else. Just down in here, guys. So again, payroll control is over here, 7,000. So it's going to be factory overhead control, this one up here, for $7,000 credit. So coming across factory overhead. That's going to be 7,000. And I forgot to do these. So 26,000 minus 19,000, because it's a credit. Remember, a credit on a debit is going to decrease it. It's going to give us 7,000 debit. And then this here is just going to give us nil. So no, it's going to give us 0. So it's not a debit or a credit. Alrighty, that kind of concludes that one up. We will get on to factory overhead controls now. So coming over here, our first one is going to be our raw materials control. From over here, factory raw. Okay, that's right. Yeah. So remembering, guys, just following that same kind of formula for looking for a factory overhead control, which is going to be the first one we see is going to be up here, up there. So the opposite account is going to be raw materials for an $800 debit. Okay. Again, a little bit hard to wrap your head around, guys, but it's always just going to be that same kind of opposite motion, of the account above, and then just changing the name. So raw materials for 800. Coming across again for the next factory overhead control, it's going to be down here for 7,000. That's going to be a debit, and it's going to be payroll control. Remembering, guys, debit's in the left hand side. So payroll control. That's going to be 7,000. Just forgot to put our balances in. Remember, guys, again, there's no balance for this one here. Debit on a debit is going to increase, so 7,800. Alrighty, moving on, guys, to factory overhead controls over here. So we've got our two accounts here. So it is 3,000, but we've got two accounts. So what we'll do in this situation, guys, is we'll just split it into its two different accounts. Okay, so we'll have factory general expenses for 2.5, factory maintenance for 500. Okay. So coming back over here, it is factory general expenses and factory maintenance. Factory maintenance. Alright, so remembering, guys, those are both going to be debits over here, 2,500 and 500. 7,800 plus the debit of 2,500 is going to give us 10,300. Adding that extra factory maintenance on gives us 10,800. Okay, so this one gets a little bit more difficult here, guys. So our work in progress account over here, which is our very last one, was 10,500. Okay, now this was a credit, so we're going to credit it by, and with the account is going to be the opposite. Remember, guys, so it's going to be work in progress. Seeing it over there, so it's going to be a credit, work in progress. It's going to be 10,500, which is going to bring this down to 300, and it's going to be a debit. Now, guys, think about it like back in level 2, if you did accounting, we had to close off our accounts to the income summary. This is kind of the same idea. So we need to make this equal to 0, and the way we're going to do that is by putting a $300 credit on, and that's going to be put under cost of goods sold. Okay, and that's going to make this account equal to 0, and it's also going to give us the figure for back over here, which we haven't done yet. So the way we get this figure in here, guys, this bottom figure, is from whatever is left over for factory overhead controls. Okay, so coming in here, cost of goods sold. Remembering, guys, important to write the whole name, not just the abbreviated COGS. Cost of goods sold is going to give us, it's going to be $300 credit, making this 0, and that nil as well. So we will come back and we'll put it across in here. So the two accounts are going to be cost of goods sold and factory overhead control. Alright guys, so yeah, again, if you're allowed a cheat sheet, I highly recommend just writing this entire list here down and just having the order all done for you, just so you can focus your efforts on the write-up at the end, because that's going to be the hardest part. Coming back to this though, looking at our finished goods control, we're going to have our balance, which is going to be 11,000, getting it from over here guys. So it's going to be our balance. Oh, forgot that in there as well. 1 March, can't forget those dates guys, they're quite important. It's going to be our balance for 11,000, and it's going to be a debit. So looking at our finished goods control, our first one is going to be down here guys for 33,000. So that finished goods is going to be classified under work in progress as a debit. Just kind of the same thing we've been doing the whole time guys. Hopefully you've kind of caught on to it by now. Work in progress. That's going to be 33,000 debit. Which is going to bring our total up to 44,000. Okay, now moving on to the next part here, is going to be a $38,000 credit over here. Now remembering guys, it's going to be called cost of goods sold. Again, just the opposite. Cost of goods sold. Okay, and that is going to be 38,000. Okay, and that is going to give us a total of 6,000 as a debit. Alrighty, final one guys, before we get on to our write-up here, is going to be, oh, we never actually filled these numbers in. They're both 300, so this is 300 here, 300 here. So, what I was just saying guys, is going to be the two accounts for cost of goods sold. Coming over here, cost of goods sold is a $38,000 debit. So the first one over here, the first finished goods, the account's going to be called finished goods, and it's going to be a $38,000 debit. So finished goods. It's going to be a $38,000 debit. So again, guys, there's no balance. So they'll only give you a balance for kind of the ones that are listed in here. So if you can't find a balance in your resource document, no worries. Just go ahead and write in your first line here. And this needs to be a 31 in there and in there. Just realized I forgot a few dates, guys. Important to remember those dates. They can kind of cost you an excellence or a merit. Finally, guys, the last account is going to be just down here. Cost of goods sold. Another debit for $300 called factory overhead controls. It's going to be 300. Closing this off to 38,300 as a debit. Okay, guys, so that is the kind of numerical side of the write-up done. just remembering, if you're allowed a cheat sheet, just kind of write that formulaic approach and you can just kind of copy it down in the exam. For your source documents, just kind of make sure that you read your resource materials to make them correctly, so that you're doing it correctly. We'll get on to the write-up now. Okay guys, so moving on to the final section here, which is going to be the write-up. This is kind of the most kind of critical and important section for 3.6. It's kind of a similar write-up to partnerships internal and any of the kind of internals you may have done in level 2. So what we kind of need to remember for this write-up, guys, is just always relating it back to the business, putting in numbers and names whenever you can, and just going into lots of nice, good detail. So when we're doing it, guys, we're going to be following the what, why, how, and then a consequence structure. And our answers should be around kind of 200 rough words for each question, and there's normally you'll get around 5 questions, each of them just asking a different aspect. So we'll go ahead and we'll get started, guys, over here with A. So an explanation of the purpose of Bags Galore operating a job cost subsystem. So remembering, guys, that like we explained at the very start of this video, a job cost subsystem is kind of made to provide a system that accurately records the direct costs of the raw materials and direct labor of each job for the business, which in this case for us is Bags Galore. Remember, guys, just carrying on from before. So we'll start off with this what section here. So the purpose of a job cost subsystem is to provide a system that accurately records the direct costs, like we were just talking about, guys, which is raw materials and direct labor for each job for the business Bags Galore. Right, guys, so again, we're just going back to the business. We're saying the name. Just kind of keep saying it again and again. Just shows that you have a deeper understanding, and it will really help you if you're trying to go for those merit and excellence marks. Alright, so guys, that's all you kind of need for your why, your what section. We'll get into the why section now. So when we're doing our why section, we're kind of talking about why it's important. Okay, so the reason that it is important for Bags Galore is because it kind of helps to identify the total cost of a job. Then it's going to allow us to kind of make sure we charge the customer the appropriate amount and we invoice them appropriately. That's kind of the main reason for it, so that we can kind of make sure that we're covering all our costs and whatnot. So in terms of writing that out, guys, we're going to start off with kind of just an opening sentence, talking about how it ensures the cost of each labor are accumulated, so the total cost of each job is identified. So what we'll say is the system ensures that the costs of each labor are accumulated, so the total cost of each job is identified. In the case of traveling trunks, each job is identified. So I mean, again, guys, relating it back to real life, if we pull up our our resource document, we were doing a job for traveling trunks for the Auckland Musical Theatre Company. We did that a little bit earlier on. So again, guys, we want to reference back to that. So each cost is identified. In the case of traveling trunks, a total cost of $2,000 was identified. And we'll just fix those spelling mistakes there. So that total cost was identified, guys. So identifying the total cost of a job is going to allow us to get our markup and our GST correct, so that the customer is going to be invoiced the appropriate amount. Okay, so what we will say here, guys, is identifying the cost of a job will allow us to mark up and add GST to the cost of the job, so that when we invoice the Auckland Musical Theatre Company, remember, guys, always linking it back to the context. So when we invoice the Auckland Musical Theatre Company, they will be charged the appropriate amount of 5,750 in this case. So again, guys, that's kind of all they're looking for here for this why section. Just kind of 2 or 3 sentences on really kind of explaining the why. Yeah, it's reasonably kind of straightforward. How section is next. So what we're doing here is we're kind of looking at, how it helps the business move forward. So this system's going to allocate overheads to each jobs, right, using the appropriate cost drivers. So the applied overheads are going to be the same dollar amount as the actual overhead expenses, hopefully, like kind of close to, which is going to help Bags Galore keeping a record of everything, of their raw materials, their leather, their hinges, just kind of stuff like that, and machine hours by processing the general journal entries and the general ledger entries. So Bags Galore will keep records using record requisition forms, like job cost cards and timesheets. Okay, so all of that is going to help the business move forward, because they're going to have a better understanding of what's going on. Okay, so this system allocates overheads to each job using the appropriate cost drivers. So the cost drivers are just helping us estimate what the overheads are going to be using the appropriate cost driver. So the applied overheads are approximately the same dollar amounts as the actual overhead expenses. So again, guys, we're just trying to calculate it correctly. Okay. Overhead expenses. Okay. Bags Galore will keep a record of all raw materials, right? Like we just kind of explained before, gave some examples. We probably won't need to go into examples. We'll just say raw materials and machine hours by processing general journal entries and general ledger entries. Right, guys, so we did our journal entries first, and then we went on to our ledger entries. And then finally, guys, we'll just wrap it up by saying Bags Galore is going to keep records using the source documents at the start. So Bags Galore will keep records using requisition forms. Sorry, job cost cards and timesheets. Alrighty, guys, so again, that is kind of what they're looking at for that kind of how section, just kind of going into detail on how it's going to help the business move forward. This is kind of a harder question compared to some of the others, but still important nonetheless. Moving on to the consequence, and this is kind of where you're going to be going for those merit and excellence marks, guys. So the consequence of if they don't accurately record the producing of traveling trunks would be that Bags Galore, the business, is going to maybe not sell them at the correct price, which could lead to them not being profitable, right? They might sell them for less than they're actually worth if they hadn't properly recorded it. So they need to ensure that all costs are covered with a significant margin to make a profit, which can then be reinvested into the business to keep it viable and help it continue operating in the future. And it will also need to ensure sufficient cash flow is being received in order to pay its suppliers and employees. It's 10 employees that we talked about at the start of this video. At the same time, Bags Galore will also be keen to keep their prices competitive so that they keep getting customers into the store. In terms of putting that into words, guys, we're going to start off by just talking about the main thing, which is that they might not sell them at the right price if they don't have a job cost subsystem, so the stuff that we were just doing. So the consequence of not correctly recording the accurate costs of producing the traveling trunks will be that Bags Galore may not sell the costume, may not sell the, we'll say the costume, may not sell the costume for a price that will be profitable to the business. Okay, like we were just saying before. So moving on, guys, we'll say Bags Galore will need to ensure that all costs are covered with a sufficient margin, right? So they need to have a bit of room for error, a sufficient margin to make a profit, right? That's quite important for the business, which can be reinvested, to keep it viable and operating in the future. Alrighty, that's looking pretty good. Moving on again, guys. So like I was just saying before, we're going to want to talk about they're also going to want to keep their prices competitive. Okay, so at the same time, Bags Galore will also want to keep their prices competitive so that customers will continue to buy costumes from them as opposed to other firms. Now, guys, you could go into talking a little bit about the cash flow and making sure that it's paying its suppliers and employees, like I said at the start of consequences, but you can probably get away with not saying it. Just a little bit extra to write. We'll move on to part B now here, guys, which is just talking about the explanation of material requisition, a timesheet, or a job cost card for Bags Galore. So again, we're going to be following our what, why, how consequence. Okay. And now what the material requisition form actually is it's just kind of making a record within the accounting job cost subsystem, which kind of tracks the physical movement or transfer of raw materials from the stores department to the production department. Okay. So the purpose of it is to kind of request the necessary materials for making the costume. So we'll go into that here. So the purpose of the material requisition form is to request the necessary raw materials such as fabric, special effects, etc. For completing the job. Alright, so that's kind of all they're looking for that what section, guys. Super straightforward. just kind of writing the basic stuff. I will still referencing to the business, of course, if you can. Next section is going to be the why. So here we're just explaining why it's important for the business. So when the production department produces goods requested in a job, that department is going to require the necessary raw materials to make the goods. So by requesting them, the material through a requisition form, they're going to be able to obtain those raw materials required to start work on the production. Okay. So, in terms of putting that into words, we'll kind of start off with an opening sentence. So, when explaining how it works. So, when the production department starts to produce the good requested in a job, that department requires necessary raw materials to make the goods for the job, right? So by requesting the material using the requisition number or job number to request the materials for the good. Right, so they're requesting those materials so they can get a hold of them and get started on the job, which obviously is quite important for Bags Galore because they need to get started on the job to complete it. So the machining department will fill out the materials requisition form to obtain the raw materials worth 500. So I'm pretty sure they're worth 500, guys, if we remember back to when we were doing our numerical journal entries. Worth $500, required to start work on the production of the traveling trunks. Alrighty, guys, so that is kind of what they're looking for that why section there. Again, it's quite similar to the why section we did above. So once you kind of do a few of these, you're going to kind of start to get into a bit of a rhythm, and you're going to get the hang of it a little bit more. So coming on to the how section. So for the how, again, talking about how this is going to help the business move forward. Okay, so these material requisition forms are going to be pre-numbered so that Bags Galore can check if it's recorded all the materials moving from the stores department. The form has got the job number recorded on the document for all materials which are going to be used in traveling trunks for this particular job. So the materials that are moving from the store, that have moved from the store, have both the description and the quantity listed so that the correct materials are supplied by the stores department. So this the document that has unit cost of materials listed and the total cost, excluding GST, are going to have the correct value, which means that once it's signed off by the production supervisor, the store department is going to have another person to sign it off, and then from there we're going to have a separation of duties, which is going to ensure the security of business assets. Okay, so a little bit of that's kind of the whole answer there that I just read out, but essentially what we're kind of saying is that we're going to have a production supervisor signing off, we're going to have store department heads signing off on it, so we're going to have a separation of duties, and yeah, we're going to also include the stuff at the start, just talking about how they're pre-numbered and stuff like that. So if you did, I think it was accounting 2.7 standard last year, looking at security systems, kind of similar to what we're talking about in there. So the materials requisition forms are pre-numbered, so Bags Galore can check that it has recorded all the materials moving from the stores department. So the form has the job number 490. So again, guys, we're just referencing back to the resource materials, showing that we kind of have a strong understanding recorded on the document for all materials used in making the traveling trunks for this particular job. Right, so those materials are going to move from the store, and they're going to have the description, and they're going to have the quantity, so that the correct materials are going to be supplied by the store department. All right, so this document is going to have all the information on it, and it's kind of going to be all make sense to everyone. So what we'll say here actually is we'll say the material requisition form is signed by the production supervisor. Okay, so the stores department knows it has authority to release the raw materials. So again, guys, just talking about making sure we have different people signing off on stuff, or people in positions of seniority that can be more trusted, just so that there's nothing kind of funny going on at the store in terms of losing any money or anything like that. So we'll say that in here. So we'll say, so the stores department knows it has authority to release the raw materials because an appropriate person has requested and authorized its use, enabling separation of duties and security of Bags Galore's business assets. Alrighty, so that's kind of what they're looking for that how section. That was quite confusing, guys. So again, if you don't kind of understand one part of a write-up, you can kind of get away with writing quite like a generic kind of few bullet points in your cheat sheet, and then just filling it out to the business once you kind of have that resource document in front of you and you understand it a bit more. Coming on to the consequence section here. Looking at the consequences of not having the correct internal controls for the requisition of raw materials, it would mean that the business's assets weren't very well protected. Okay, so the consequence of not having the correct internal controls for the requisition of raw materials means that the assets of Bags Galore will not be protected, and the correct cost of the materials to traveling for the job traveling trunks will be incorrectly calculated. So once all of the costs are identified, it enables Bags Galore to correctly decide on a selling price for the costume, which is going to be profitable and competitive, right? So we'll kind of just say that out there. So once all other costs are identified, Bags Galore will be able to correctly decide on a selling price for the costume, which is both competitive, right, because we still have to worry about our competitors, and profitable. Okay, so moving on again, guys, down here to C. we're looking at an explanation of justifying the choice of cost drivers for overheads and the importance of correctly allocating cost jobs for bags galore. So it's going to be quite a similar answer to the last kind of question that we did, guys, and the first one as well. So for the first part, which is going to be the kind of what, we're going to be looking at kind of overhead costs, allocating them to jobs, the cost of employing craftsmen and the labor, and that time spent measuring the size of the traveling trunks. Okay, so in terms of putting that into words, what we'll say is so Bags Galore's overhead costs are allocated to jobs using labor costs. So these are the costs of employing the craftsmen to make the traveling trunks, and the time spent measuring the trunks and kind of altering the size of them. So again, guys, just that kind of stuff that's involved with the job traveling trunks. Moving on to the next section, which is going to be our why. So we're going to be talking about why it's important, and remembering that we want to link the actual cost driver that's kind of calculated in our answer. I don't have it off the top of my head, so we won't include it in here, but again, guys, like I've said quite a few times, very important to go back and record the cost of your jobs. So the allocation base, allocating the cost drivers. So the allocation base used for Bags Galore of labor hours to apply overheads is appropriate because the finishing department is labor intensive, using mainly labor in the production process. Right, kind of like what I was talking about back at the start of this video around why we're going to be using labor as our cost driver back at the very start, guys, that very first source document we did. Anyway, coming back to this, using mainly labor in the production process, the total overheads for the year for Bags Galore, and then we would have just put our number in there, need to be allocated over all suitcases for that year that have been produced. Alrighty, guys, so that's kind of what we're looking for that kind of why section. We'll go into the how now. So by now, I think you guys were kind of starting to be kind of catching the bit of the idea on how to kind of go through and formulaically put through the answers. Okay, so kind of follows the same kind of path for all of them. So like I've kind of been saying this whole time, once you kind of do a practice test or two, you'll really start to get the hang of this and kind of understand everything a little bit more. So in talking about how it's going to help the business move forward and kind of linking it to the overhead applied to the job in your answer, you want to kind of say it's important that overhead costs are going to be estimated as accurately as possible, so that the year's overhead costs are allocated as accurately as possible. Because if they weren't, you could kind of be short a lot of money, or could have been overcharging all your customers and kind of potentially even sending them elsewhere, which wouldn't be very good. So for Bags Galore, so in Bags Galore, put capital in there, in Bags Galore, the overhead costs are allocated to jobs using labor cost. So labor cost has been chosen because for bags, like we're kind of just talking about just then, guys, because Bags Galore mainly uses labor, and that's going to be the overhead costs are going to be generated by costs incurred by employing the supervisors, right? So labor costs has been chosen because Bags Galore, because for Bags Galore, the majority of their overhead costs are generated by the costs incurred by employing supervisors. Right, so kind of like what we were just talking about, and also what we were talking about back when we were doing our kind of write-up. I think 2,500 was incurred just from supervisors, looking over the employees kind of as they're working, making sure they're doing a good job and whatnot. Costs incurred by employing supervisors, and it's also going to include a few other things, right? So it would also include the cost of staff who are not actively involved in production. For example, and we can just kind of create an example here. So we might say, like, for example, a cleaner who cleans the assembly kind of area at the end of each day. In addition, we've also got depreciation. So if you guys remember from accounting last year and also this year, depreciation, quite a big expense for most businesses. Not too much so, I'd imagine, for a business like this, but we can still put it in nonetheless. So in addition, the other overhead costs would be relatively low, including depreciation, with an example being depreciation is maybe what we'll say. Okay, with an example being depreciation. And then finally we'll kind of, yeah, actually no, I think that kind of explains it in whole. We'll go into the consequence section now here, guys. So consequence. So the consequence of not having kind of the right allocation of cost drivers would be that Bags Galore could end up with too big kind of an under or over allocation of overheads to a job because they're not really doing it correctly, which could lead to an incorrect selling price, which means that they would be undercharging or overcharging their employees, their customers, neither of which would be good for the business, right? So in terms of putting that into words, what we'll say is if the cost driver for the allocation of overheads is not correct, then Bags Galore could end up with too big an under or over allocation of overheads to the job. This would lead to Bags Galore calculating an incorrect sales price. Meaning they would under or overcharge their potential customers, which would be uncompetitive and hurt future sales and profitability. Alright, so that's kind of what they're after for C. We'll move on to part D here, guys. So for part D, they are just looking at an explanation of why some jobs result in an over or under application of overheads. So, like we just kind of explained a few times, guys, so the allocation rate is kind of based on an estimate of the cost driver, which in this case is going to be labor hours and the overheads of bags galore. So only at kind of like the end of an accounting period is it going to be possible to kind of calculate the actual overheads incurred by the business, but the estimated rate is applied to kind of the actual results, okay, the actual overheads. But because actual results for both cost drivers and labor hours and overheads will differ from budget kind of to estimates, the applied overhead using the rate is going to be different to the actual overheads incurred, if that kind of makes sense. So they're not going to be the same, because there's always kind of going to be a little bit different, right? In terms of putting that into words for the what section, we'll just kind of start off by saying, so the allocation rate is based on estimates of the cost driver. Spell that there. Estimates of the cost driver, which in this case is labor hours, and the overheads of bags galore. So only, like I was just kind of saying before, guys, so only at the end of the accounting period will it be possible to calculate the entire actual overheads incurred by the business. So this estimated rate is applied to actual jobs, to actual results, like we're just kind of saying, to actual results, but because actual results for both cost driver and labor hours will always differ from budgets, the applied overhead using this rate, the rate will be different to the actual overheads. So that's kind of just like a long, tedious way of saying that. Just kind of like a long, tedious way of saying that the budget's not always right, and it's going to be often wrong. It's going to be always wrong, but that's going to mean that it's going to be under or over applied. It's kind of the general gist of that part there. In terms of the why, so why it's important. So we use this estimated overhead for the cost driver as it may be sometime before the actual overhead for the year can be calculated, right? So we're not going to be able to know it off the top of our head, so we just have to do an estimate. And there will be many jobs that need costing in order to calculate a suitable selling price. So kind of therefore, we must use the estimated costs in order to calculate that overhead. Okay, so in terms of putting that into words, we'll say we use the estimated overheads for the cost driver as it may be some time before the actual overhead for the year can be calculated. Throughout the year, there'll be many jobs, like we were just saying. Many jobs that need costing to find a suitable selling price. So therefore, we must estimate the costs in order to calculate overhead. Okay, so that's kind of what they are looking for that why section, a little bit shorter. We'll get into the next part here, which is going to be the how, so kind of how it's helping the business moving forward. By now, I'm sure a lot of you guys will kind of have it under control from watching this video, so you'll kind of start to kind of understand the patterns. What we'll talk about for the how will just kind of be the ability to calculate an estimated overhead, which is going to be different from the actual kind of allowed overheads for Bags Galore, to kind of give a appropriate selling price. It's kind of the advantage of that. So in terms of putting that into words, so the ability to calculate an estimated overhead, which will be different from the actual allowed overhead for Bags Galore, to go ahead and calculate an appropriate cost, right? Like what I was just saying before, for the costume, and therefore an appropriate selling price. Nice. So that's kind of all we need to write there. We don't need to write too much for the kind of question around some jobs result in an over or under application of overheads, because it's very straightforward. This part here. Terms about the consequences. If Bags Galore kind of didn't have an estimated overhead to calculate the cost of their kind of goods, then they wouldn't be able to calculate an appropriate selling price. So it's very similar to part C that we did just up there. So if Bags Galore were not able to use an estimated overhead to calculate the cost of their costumes, then they would not be able to calculate an appropriate selling price for the finished costume, which may mean that the business would not be able to remain competitive and sustainable. Alright, so that's kind of the answer for D there. For E here, we'll just kind of quite a very, very short question. So we'll just go through it. So for the what, it's kind of just one short, simple sentence. So the recommended selling price of traveling trunks is $5,750, like we just did in the previous part, in the previous write-up, in the journal entries and the source documents. The why is going to be it's going to be because the price is going to be $5,750 in order to ensure sufficient revenue to cover the producing of the costume and provide a profit for Bags Galore to continue to be a viable business. So we'll just say the selling price of $5,750. And now, guys, for when you're doing your tests, just please remember to always have those prices in there, because they really help it out and they show that you're not just copying and that you actually have an understanding. So really remember to include those prices. Recommended for the traveling trunks is important because it will ensure that sufficient revenue will be received for the sale of the costume in order to cover the costs of producing the costume and provide a profit for Bags Galore to continue to be a viable business. Perfect. Alrighty, moving on to the how section here, guys. We're just going to talk about how it helps the business moving forward, which is that it helps it remain profitable. Okay, so the ability for Bags Galore to remain profitable, kind of building on from what we just said, will mean they are able to keep operating, are able to continue operating, and producing goods for customers in the future. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. You could probably go into a little bit more detail about talking about potentially expanding in the future, but we don't really need to go into that. In terms of the consequence, if they didn't have the appropriate selling price, they would be in danger of not covering the cost of production, and if the price was too high, it was uncompetitive. So again, by now that you're at the end of this video, you'll kind of see that the write-up is very similar for each question. So if Bags Galore did not calculate an appropriate selling price, then the business may be in danger of not covering the cost of production. Equally, if price was set too high and was uncompetitive, potential customers may go to competitors, resulting in a loss in revenue, which would negatively affect Bags Galore. Alrighty, guys, so that kind of wraps up E, and I think, yeah, so that wraps up the kind of write-up and the rest of this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it and found it useful. Check out the notes that I have in the in my bio for this 3.6 for the 3.6 assessment. There'll be a cheat sheet in there, maybe some other notes as well. Might find them useful. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day.